Well, hi everybody. This evening I would like to share with you a few reflections that I have had for a few years ago as an early researcher on, environmental conflicts. It's not a happy ending story, but I think that that reflection could be very useful to debate, to think about environmental conflicts. Well, it happened more or less 6 years ago. I was at the point of finishing my MA at political theory, and it was a quite decisive moment, not only because of, finish the dissertation as itself, but also because as I wanted to carry out a career as a researcher, I had to choose, I feel the pressure to choose a very good topic to focus later after that. So I wanted to do a quite good decision in this sense. But anyway, what I had very clear in that moment is that during the previous year I have learned that the relationship between nature and society, between human nature and extra-human nature society is necessarily a relationship of power. So only political ecology can address, can understand, can may be useful to produce knowledge to have climate justice and environmental justice. So in that context, who was my supervisor at that moment, tell me, well, I've been working for a long time in Bolivia. I know a few people, a few good scholars working there. I know a few indigenous leaders of communities that have been involved in some important environmental conflicts. So the point is that you should do the study about quite important environmental conflicts in that moment in Bolivia. It was about the Tignis Road conflict. So, well, I didn't know so much about that conflict. I know that it has been very recently. It was in 2011. So, yeah, I think I won't have any difficulties with language. I have very good contacts. So let's go ahead, Bolivia. So the first thing that I do when I arrive there in Bolivia is to get in contact with that scholars, because one of the main things that I knew of that conflict, it was maybe quite surprisingly a principle. It was that apparently, I don't know how, but the 80% 5 years ago had support in a referendum. The 80% of the local population, the local communities, indigenous communities in Tignis Park apparently had supported the building of the road. I couldn't understand why that road that came from the northern part of Bolivia at Beni department to the southern part of Bolivia, Cochabamba, from San Ignacio de Moxos to Villa Tunari, splitting in two parts, that Amazonia and Bolivia for 55 kilometers could be possible, could be supported, but by that local communities, I couldn't understand. So the main thing that the scholars that have been following closer that conflict is that you mustn't trust on that results. You mustn't trust on that results only because it goes beyond an environmental conflict as itself. It is about a project of development for the whole country of Bolivia to continue a model of extractivist practices, to have easy incomes through graving for multinational companies, goods such as, I don't know, there in Bolivia is quite important, minerals, or also fuel, oil, or wood, and so on. So yeah, it wasn't only about to violate the sovereignty of that people, of that community of Tignis Park. It was also about to violate the whole sovereignty of the country. So yeah, that explanation could fit a little bit. I could understand more than before. But even though I need to learn what has happened, the whole process, why still there were communities that support, apparently, that project. So the first thing that I do when I learn a little bit more about that problem, that's to have permissions to enter to Tignis National Park, and I moved to Isunita and also to Puerto Patiño, that is in the southern part of this very near for the capital of Cochabamba department. So when I arrive there, I get in touch with some communities. The main communities there were Aymara and Quechua. The problem is that Aymara and Quechua has support, more or less. They are not originally the people that were living there for centuries. They were settlers that moved there, and they were planting coca plants to export to another parts, and they were made forced displacement of the local original populations. And of course, it was obvious. They told me that they would support the projects of the roads, obviously. But when I interview another 3 of the main ethnical groups that have been living there for centuries, such as Yuracares, Chimanes, and also Moxeños, Trinitarios, they told me quite a different narrative about the situation of their understanding of what was happening. They told me that, for instance, the river, the Isiboro River in the southern part of the park, that they has been using for a long time to move along the park, to transport itself, because a few groups, a few communities are nomads. They no longer could use that. The fishes that they have been fishing for a long time, they couldn't sell it at the markets, the local markets there. They also told me about species, protected species. Do you know what is maybe a blue unicorn? Obviously, it's not a unicorn as itself, but it's a little better, very similar to dodo that is extincted. So local communities such as Yucares that have been worried about that species for a long time told me that it has a big problem, because obviously illegal hunting, poaching will arrive there, and obviously this species will disappear. And they also told me problems that they already have previously, such as the coca plants crops, because I don't know if you know, but coca plants require a lot of water, require a lot of nutrients, and it exhausts the soil. So for 20 years, for 30 years, as far as Aymaras and Quechua arrive there, they have a very important problem in that sense for the local agriculture. And they also told me about another problem, such as, I don't know, for instance, the legal problem, because it wasn't only about to violate the national law. It was only to not respect, to not enforce international law, because, for instance, Bolivia has support in that time, previously, some agreements with International Labor Organization to respect that communities the right to live in their own lands. So it was so frustrating to listen about the situation. At the end, it's gonna seem, it's gonna be more forced displacement of the population more than even 30 or 20 years before. And the most of all of it, the most frustrating part, it was about to hearing how some mothers or some grandparents from, for example, Chimanes communities, that is the most important one inside these 3 original groups, reply me and reproduce the same discourse and the same narrative that has been used to legitimize that project. They told me, well, we don't know, obviously we don't know support Morales. We are not benefit by coca plant trading. But you know, if we have here the road, we may have the presence of a state, we may have the presence of better services about, you know, better hospitals or school for the children. And sadly, obviously, as far as I know, nowadays, it haven't happened. So don't misunderstand me. I don't want to judge the rhetorics or the narrative for that people, but at that moment, for me, it was so difficult to understand how is the process to accept to leave the place where you have been living your ancestor, your legacy for a long time. So, in short, what I want to share with you, it was two reflections. On the one hand, to understand, to research on environmental conflicts, we mustn't understand environmental conflicts as a dichotomic, as a bipolar conflict, because as you have seen, there are multiple actors and multiple alliances that at the end makes the difference inside the conflict. And the second one, and the hardest one, is that we cannot, let's say, presuppose or preconcept which is going to be the ideology or the perception of the reality of some of the actors, because at the end we are going to clash against the reality. If we clash against the reality, we won't be able to transform it. Thank you.